I stood at the edge of the ballroom, the air thick with the scent of roses and champagne, my fingers tightening around the stem of a glass I hadn't touched. The chandeliers above glittered like stars trapped in crystal cages, casting fractured light across the crowd. My sister Heather glowed at the center of it all, her laughter a melody that drowned out the orchestra's delicate strings. She was the sun, and I was the shadow, always had been. But tonight, something shifted inside me, a whisper of something ancient, something mine stirring in the dark corners of my heart. They thought I didn't know. My parents, Robert and Elaine, raised their glasses toward me, their smiles sharp as knives, their voices dripping with false gratitude. To Claire, my father said, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the guests, for the gift that made this night possible. The crowd applauded, their eyes soft with pity, as if I'd willingly surrendered something precious. Heather turned to me, her diamond tiara catching the light, and mouthed, "Thank you, sister." Her words were a spell meant to bind me to silence, to weave me into their story of sacrifice. But I wasn't their martyr. Not anymore. The Lake House Harbor's Rest wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary built by my grandfather Jack's hands, its timbers infused with his quiet strength, its windows holding the reflections of my childhood summers. Every creak of its floorboards sang of mornings spent fishing at dawn of evenings, watching the lake swallow the sun in hues of gold and lavender. It was the only place I'd ever felt truly seen, where Jack's steady gaze had taught me I was more than the overlooked daughter, the quiet sister. He'd called it Harbor's Rest, a name that felt like a promise carved into the earth itself. They sold it. My parents, with their careful lies and forged signatures, had taken it to fund Heather's $150,000 wedding, a spectacle of custom flowers flown from distant shores, a gown woven in Parisian atelier fireworks that painted the sky like a sorcerer's dream. They thought I was too polite, too passive, too forgiving to notice. They thought I'd stay silent, as I always had, letting their betrayal slip into the shadows. But I'd seen the papers. I'd found the documents tucked away in a locked drawer in my father's study, the ink of my name scrawled in a hand that wasn't mine. I'd spoken to the buyers, a kind couple, unaware of the theft they'd been drawn into. I'd hired a lawyer, Jessica, whose sharp mind cut through deception like a blade through mist. And as my parents toasted to their victory, as Heather basked in her stolen spotlight, I stood there smiling, my heart a quiet storm. They didn't know that the ground beneath them was already crumbling, that the lake's whispers had reached me, urging me to reclaim what was mine. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's about the power that wakes when you realize you've been silent too long. It's about the magic that hums in the bones of those who refuse to be erased. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see why the best revenge is the one that unfolds like a spell unseen until it's too late. The lake house wasn't just wood and stone. It was alive in its own way, its walls holding secrets older than my grandfather's hands. Jack had built it with more than nails and timber. He'd woven something into its foundation, a quiet magic that only I seemed to feel. As a child, I'd trace my fingers along the carvings on the porch spirals and waves that seemed to pulse under my touch, as if the house itself were breathing. Jack would watch me, his eyes crinkling with a knowing smile, and say, "Claire, this place will always hold you when the world lets go." I was 36 now, an architect in Boston crafting buildings that echoed the balance and grace I'd learned at Harbor's Rest. My life was quiet, deliberate, a tapestry of solitude and work. But every summer I returned to the lake, to the dock, where Jack taught me to fish, to the attic, where we'd sketch blueprints by lantern light. The house was my anchor, my proof that I was more than the daughter who faded into the background, overshadowed by Heather's radiance. Heather was 5 years younger, a wildfire, where I was a steady stream. She was beautiful, vibrant, the kind of person who could command a room with a single laugh. Our parents adored her, their attention always drawn to her spark. I didn't resent her, not exactly. I'd learned early to carve my own space to find solace in books and blueprints in the silence of the lake. But Jack saw me. He saw the girl who went quiet in 5th grade after a teacher's cruel words, the girl who dreamed of building things that lasted. He gave me my first drafting pencils, taught me to steer the boat across the lake, wrote me letters that felt like spells of encouragement. When Jack died 6 years ago, his absence left a hole no blueprint could fill. His will was read in a dusty office, and the room went still when the lawyer spoke, "To my granddaughter Claire, who understands the value of solitude and the meaning of a quiet life, I leave Harbor's Rest and all that it holds." My mother's smile was thin, her words sharp. "Well, you were always his favorite." My father looked away, and Heather crossed her arms, her silence louder than any protest. I didn't hear them. All I felt was Jack's love reaching across death to remind me I was enough. The lake house became my refuge, a place I'd visit to mend the roof or walk the trails Jack once loved. But last summer, something changed. I arrived to find the porch light on, though I'd turned it off. The front door was ajar, just a fraction, as if someone had tried to cover their tracks. A photo frame on the mantel was tilted its glass, catching the light wrong. The air felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath, warning me. I should have listened then. But it wasn't until the wedding that the truth broke through, sharp and cold as lake water in winter. The wedding was a spectacle, a dream spun from excess. The Rhode Island estate glittered with crystal and silk, the air alive with music and the hum of drones capturing every moment. Heather floated down the aisle, her gown a cascade of starlight, while guests whispered about the cost, the orchids flown from Thailand, the champagne older than me. I stood at the edge, my pale blue dress, a quiet contrast to the sequins around me, my hands steady, but my pulse racing. My parents took the stage during the reception, their faces flushed with pride. To Claire, my father said again, his voice booming, whose generosity made this night a reality. The crowd turned to me, their applause a weight I didn't want. Heather joined them, her eyes locking on mine, her smile a mask. My sister gave up so much, she said, her voice sweet as poison. She's the reason I'm standing here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter their illusion, to tell the world they'd stolen my home, my memories, my legacy. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I raised my glass, my smile a mirror of theirs, and said nothing. Inside, the storm grew stronger, fed by the whispers of the lake, by the memory of Jack's voice. If the world turns its back on you, come home. They didn't know I'd found the forged documents hidden in a folder marked estate. They didn't know I'd spoken to the Petersons, the couple now living in my house, who'd bought it in good faith, unaware of the lie. They didn't know Jessica was already building a case, her office lined with papers that mapped their betrayal. And they didn't know about the dreams, vivid, strange visions that had started weeks ago of the lake house, glowing under a moonlit sky, its carvings pulsing like a heartbeat, calling me back. As the fireworks lit up the night, I slipped away from the crowd, my steps silent on the marble floor. Outside, the air was cool, the stars sharp above the estate. I closed my eyes and felt it, a thread of something ancient tugging at my soul. The lake house wasn't just a place. It was a promise, a power, a piece of me they thought they could take. But I was done being silent. I was done being their shadow. Tomorrow, they'd find the letters in their mailboxes, legal documents, yes, but also something more. A reckoning. A spell of truth woven with the strength Jack had given me. They'd underestimated me, but the lake was on my side, and its magic was waking. The lake house wasn't just a place. It was a living thing, its timbers humming with secrets I could never quite name. As a child, I'd press my ear to the walls of Harbor's Rest half Ipsa and swear I heard it whisper back soft, rhythmic murmurs like the pulse of the lake itself. My grandfather Jack would find me there, curled up on the porch, my fingers tracing the strange carvings etched into the railings, and he'd smile, his eyes glinting with something ancient. That house has stories, Claire, he'd say, his voice rough as old wood. Listen close, and it'll tell you yours. Now, standing in the shadow of my sister's wedding, those stories felt like warnings. The house had tried to speak to me, but I hadn't listened, not until it was too late. The memory of its silence haunted me, a reminder of who I was before the world taught me to be small. But as I stood there watching my family rewrite my story, I felt it stirring again, the strength Jack had seen in me, the power I'd buried beneath years of quiet compliance. I was 36, an architect in Boston, my life, a careful sketch of solitude and precision. My designs were elegant, balanced like the lake house itself, a testament to Jack's lessons in structure and stillness. But my heart belonged to Harbor's Rest, to the summers that shaped me to the man who saw me when no one else did. I was 9 the first time I boarded the train to Lake Wyman, my small suitcase clutched tight, my heart racing with something I didn't yet know was freedom. The city was loud, chaotic. My parents' voices always tuned to Heather's frequency, her laughter, her demands, her endless need for attention. I was the quiet one, the one who didn't mind being forgotten, or so they thought. But Jack knew better. He'd meet me at the station, his old truck rumbling like a beast, his smile warm as the summer sun. Ready for some peace, kid, he'd ask, and I'd nod, already feeling the weight of the world lift. Harbor's Rest was a world apart. The lake stretched out like a mirror, reflecting skies that seemed too big for the city. The house stood at its edge, its cedar walls weathered but strong, its windows glinting like eyes that saw everything. Jack had built it with his own hands, a retired carpenter who believed in things that lasted. Oak beams, iron hinges, promises. He called it Harbor's Rest, a name that felt like a spell, and it was. Every summer, it cast me under its protection, shielding me from the noise of my family's indifference. Jack was more than a grandfather. He was my sanctuary. While Heather flitted in and out, bored by the lake's stillness, I stayed. I learned to sand wood until it gleamed, to cast a fishing line with patience, to listen to the silence that settled over the lake at dusk. Jack taught me to see structure in chaos, to find beauty in simplicity. He'd sit with me on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee steaming side by side, and tell me stories not of heroes or dragons, but of the land, the water, the way the world held its breath for those who knew how to listen. One night, when I was 11, I found a carving on the underside of a windowsill, a spiral within a spiral glowing faintly in the moonlight. I touched it, and a shiver ran through me like the house was sharing a secret. Jack caught me staring and chuckled. "That's old magic, Claire." He said, his voice low. "The kind that binds a place to a person. This house belongs to you as much as you belong to it." I didn't understand then, but I felt it, a connection deeper than ownership, a thread tying my soul to the lake. Heather was different. She'd visit for a weekend, maybe 2, before racing back to her friends, her phone, her life. She called the lake, boring its silence, oppressive. She was beautiful, lively, a flame that drew every eye. Our parents, Elizabeth and Thomas, orbited her like moths, praising her charm, indulging her whims. Ballet lessons, new phones, designer clothes, nothing was too much for Heather. I was expected to fend for myself, to work summer jobs for art supplies, to figure things out alone. I didn't mind, not really. I had Jack, and I had the lake. When I was 16, Jack let me steer the boat across the lake alone, the wind in my hair, the water whispering my name. At 22, he taught me to winterize the cabin, his hands steady over mine as we sealed the windows against the cold. When I landed my first job at an architecture firm, he sent me a letter, 3 pages of careful script, each word a spell of pride. "You're building more than buildings, Claire," he wrote. "You're building yourself. Don't let anyone tear that down." 6 years ago, Jack died. His death wasn't sudden, but it was a wound that never healed. I'd expected the lake house to be sold or split, its magic carved up like a pie. But when the lawyer read his will, the room froze. To my granddaughter Claire, who understands the value of solitude and the meaning of a quiet life, I leave Harbor's Rest and all that it holds. The words hit me like a wave, warm and heavy, washing away the noise of my family's disapproval. My mother's smile was sharp, her voice sweeter than it should have been. Well, you were always his favorite. My father looked away, muttering about fairness. Heather crossed her arms, her silence a storm waiting to break. I didn't care. Jack had seen me, had chosen me, had given me the one place where I belonged. The house wasn't just a gift. It was a declaration of my worth, a promise that I was enough. But promises, I learned, could be broken. The years after Jack's death were a blur of work and solitude. I poured myself into my designs, crafting buildings that echoed the lake house's balance, strong, simple, lasting. Every few months, I'd escape to Harbor's Rest, cleaning the gutters, walking the trails, listening to the house's whispers. It was my sanctuary, untouched by time, its carvings still warm under my fingers, its air thick with memories. Then, last summer, the whispers changed. I arrived to find the porch light on, though I'd turned it off. The door was ajar, the air inside heavy with something unfamiliar. A photo frame on the mantel was tilted its glass, catching the light wrong. I touched the carvings on the railings, expecting their usual pulse, but they were still as if holding their breath. I should have known then that something was wrong, that the house was trying to warn me. But I was too busy, too trusting, too caught up in my own world to listen. The dreams started soon after. Every night I'd see the lake house under a moonlit sky, its windows glowing like eyes, its carvings pulsing with light. I'd walk its halls, my footsteps silent, and feel a presence, Jack's maybe, or something older, deeper, urging me to look closer. I'd wake with my heart racing, my hands trembling, the lake's whispers echoing in my ears. Find the truth, Claire. It's yours to claim. I didn't understand until the wedding, until my parents' false gratitude and Heather's polished lies shattered the spell of my silence. They'd sold the house, forged my name, used my money to fund their spectacle. But the house wasn't gone. It was waiting its magic, stirring its stories unfinished. And I was ready to listen. The air in my apartment was heavy that night, the kind of stillness that presses against your skin, urging you to listen. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop casting shadows across the room, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The dreams had grown stronger, more insistent visions of Harbor's Rest under a moonlit sky, its carvings pulsing like a heartbeat, its windows whispering my name. I'd wake with a jolt, my heart racing, the lake's voice echoing, "Find the truth, Claire. It's yours to claim." I didn't know what it meant, not yet, but something was wrong, and the house was trying to tell me. It started with small signs like ripples on the lake's surface before a storm. I'd gone to Harbor's Rest a month ago, needing its quiet to steady my soul. But the house felt off, as if it were holding its breath. The porch light was on, though I'd switched it off. The front door was ajar, just a fraction, the lock gleaming in a way it never had. A photo frame on the mantel, Jack and me fishing at dawn, was tilted its glass, catching the light wrong. I touched the spiral carvings on the railings, expecting their familiar warmth, but they were cold, silent, as if the house were warning me of an intruder in its heart. I should have listened then, but I was too caught up in work and the noise of my family's wedding plans to hear the whispers clearly. It wasn't until Dorothy Myers called that the truth broke through sharp and cold as a blade. The phone buzzed on my counter, an unfamiliar number flashing across the screen. I let it go to voicemail, too tired from a day of site visits to deal with a stranger. An hour later, as I poured tea, I played the message, and Dorothy's voice filled the room warm but edged with concern. "Claire, dear, it's Dorothy Myers from Lake Wyman. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I was surprised to hear you'd sold the lake house. Such a shame we didn't get to say goodbye. The new couple's lovely, though, very friendly. I'll miss seeing you up here in the summers." The kettle slipped from my hand, clattering into the sink. Sold. The word was a stone in my chest. Dorothy must have been mistaken. Maybe she'd seen a new neighbor, a rental nearby. But Dorothy wasn't the type to confuse details. She'd lived 2 doors down from Harbor's Rest for 30 years her memory, as sharp as the lake's winter ice. My hands trembled as I called her back, the phone cold against my ear. "Dorothy, it's Claire," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What did you mean, sold? Oh, sweetheart." She replied, her tone softening with worry. "I didn't mean to upset you. I just assumed you'd moved on. The for sale sign was up for a couple of weeks, then gone. A moving truck came, and the couple's been there since. I thought it was your decision." My mouth went dry. "Dorothy, I never put the house up for sale." There was a long silence, heavy as the lake at midnight. "Well then," she said finally, "you might want to come take a look." I hung up my mind, racing like a storm over water. The dreams flashed through me, the house glowing, its carvings alive. Jack's voice whispering, "Find the truth." I opened my laptop and logged into the county property tax portal, my fingers shaking as I typed. Every spring, I received a tax notice for Harbor's Rest, a ritual as steady as the tides. This year, nothing had come, no mail, no email, not even in spam. I thought it was delayed, lost in the chaos of Heather's wedding plans. Now, I wasn't so sure. The portal loaded and my breath caught. The ownership records had changed. 6 weeks ago, the title for Harbor's Rest had been transferred to Robert and Elaine Emerson, my parents. My stomach twisted, a cold certainty settling in my bones. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft. I called the county clerk's office, my voice calm despite the storm inside. "Yes, Miss Emerson," the clerk said after a brief hold, her tone clipped and professional. "Our records show a change of ownership processed 6 weeks ago. New documents filed under Robert and Elaine Emerson." I hung up the room, spinning. My parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to trust, had stolen the one place that held me together. But the house wasn't done with me yet. As I sat there staring at the screen, a notification pinged a security alert from my bank. A new device had logged into my account from an IP in Vermont. My financial advisor had emailed 2 days earlier asking if I'd authorized it. I hadn't. I opened my banking app, my pulse pounding. A series of withdrawals stared back at me, $7,850 to Lux Bridal Boston, $12,400 to D'Amato Jewelers, $21,000 to Lemur Resort Group, $9,600 to a videography service in Providence, wedding payments, Heather's wedding, my money. The lake house wasn't enough. They'd taken my savings too, weaving me into their lie without my consent. I changed my passwords, added 2-factor authentication, and alerted the bank's fraud department, my hands moving on instinct. But as I sat there, the laptop's glow, the only light in the room, something deeper stirred. The dreams, the carvings, the house's silence, they weren't just warnings. They were a call to action, a summons from something older than my pain. Jack had built that house with more than wood. He'd woven a promise into its bones, a power that was waking, now urging me to fight. I left Boston before dawn, the road to Lake Wyman, stretching out like a path into a dream. The familiar landmarks, the general store, the crooked sign for the canoe rental shack, the faded "Welcome to Wyman Lake" banner, felt different, now shrouded in shadow. The GPS said 3 hours, but it felt longer, each mile pulling me closer to the truth. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart a drumbeat echoing the lake's whispers. When I turned onto the gravel driveway, the sight stole my breath. The hand-carved sign Jack had hung decades ago, Harbor's Rest etched in steady script, was gone. The posts stood empty like sentinels mourning a loss. I slowed to a stop, staring at the house. The shutters were painted a stark blue, not the soft green Jack had chosen. The porch swing was missing. The front door gleamed with a new keypad lock, cold and modern, a betrayal of the brass knob Jack had installed. I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel, and approached the door, unsure of what I'd say. Before I could knock it open, A woman with short, silvering hair and a kind smile stood there, a man in khakis and a baseball cap behind her. "Hi there," she said, her voice warm. "You must be from next door. We've been meaning to introduce ourselves." I blinked my throat tight. "I'm Claire Emerson," I said. This was my grandfather's house. The woman's smile faltered, her eyes widening. "Oh, Jack Emerson's granddaughter. I'm so sorry we didn't realize. I'm Sarah Peterson. This is my husband, Mark. We bought the house from your parents a few weeks ago." My stomach lurched. My parents? Yes. Robert and Elaine Emerson's Sarah said, her tone hesitant now. "They handled everything. Said it was a family estate. We didn't know you were still around." Mark gestured politely. "Would you like to come in? We haven't moved much in yet." I nodded, my legs moving on their own. Inside the house felt like a stranger wearing a familiar face. The mantel was bare, Jack's tool chest gone, the photographs of our summers missing. The air was wrong, stripped of the cedar and memory scent I loved. Sarah pulled a folder from a drawer. "We kept the paperwork organized," she said, handing it to me. The title transfer closing documents, notarized forms. I opened it with shaking hands. There on the deed was my signature, or a version of it close but wrong, like a reflection in a cracked mirror. Above it, the sellers Robert and Elaine Emerson. Below, a notary seal dated 6 weeks ago. My voice trembled, but I steadied it. "I never signed this. I didn't authorize this sale." Sarah's hand flew to her chest. "Oh dear," she said, her voice breaking. "We bought it in good faith. We had no idea." "I believe you," I said quietly, my eyes still on the papers. "But I need to speak with my attorney." I left the house, the folder clutched tight, and sat in my car under the towering pines. The lake glittered in the distance, its surface calm, but hiding depths I couldn't see. I dialed Jessica Cole, my old college friend, now a real estate attorney with a mind sharp enough to cut through lies. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, what's wrong?" "They sold the lake house," I said, my voice low but steady. "My parents. They forged my name. I'm holding the documents now." A pause. Then Jessica's voice calm and clear. "Send me photos of every page. We'll start with a document analysis and contact the county recorder. If your signature was forged, this is a criminal matter. We can undo this, Claire. We can take it back." I snapped photos of the papers, my hands steady now, and sent them to her. As I drove away, the trees seemed taller, the sky darker, the lake's whispers louder. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact, cold and sharp. But something else was waking inside me, a strength I hadn't known I had. The house wasn't just a place, it was a promise of power, and it was calling me to fight. That night, as I lay in bed, the dreams returned. The lake house stood under a starlit sky, its carvings glowing like embers. Jack's voice echoed soft, but sure. "You're stronger than their lies, Claire. The house is yours. Claim it." I woke with my heart pounding, not with fear, but with purpose. The lake was on my side, and its magic was mine to wield. The dreams came every night now, relentless as the tide. Harbor's Rest stood under a sky stitched with stars, its cedar walls glowing faintly as if lit from within. The carvings on the porch railings pulsed like veins, their spirals twisting in patterns that seemed to whisper secrets only I could hear. In the dreams I walked the dock, the lake's surface a mirror reflecting not the sky, but my own face, older, fiercer eyes burning with a strength I hadn't yet claimed. Jack's voice echoed through the mist. "They took what's yours, Claire. Take it back." I'd wake with my heart pounding, my hands tingling, as if I'd touched something electric, something alive. The lake house wasn't just a place anymore. It was a force, a partner in this fight, urging me to see what I'd been too quiet, too trusting to notice. My parents had sold it, forged my name, drained my accounts to fund Heather's wedding, a betrayal woven with lies so bold they thought I'd never unravel them. But the house was speaking, and I was listening. Its magic, whatever it was waking inside me, and I was ready to wield it. Jessica's office was a fortress of order, its shelves lined with legal books, its air sharp with the scent of coffee and ink. She sat across from me, her dark hair pulled back her eyes, scanning the photos I'd sent pages of forged documents, my signature twisted into a stranger's hand, the notary seal stamped like a curse. "This is more than fraud," she said, her voice steady but edged with steel. "It's identity theft, real estate fraud, misappropriation of funds. They didn't just take your house, Claire. They took your name." I nodded my fingers, tracing the edge of her desk, grounding myself against the storm inside. "What do we do?" Jessica leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "We move fast. I've already contacted Pamela Rohr, the notary whose seal was used. She confirmed it was stolen last December, her journal, and stamp taken from a community center. She filed a report, and the seal number matches the one on your deed. It's a forgery, Claire. We have proof." I exhaled, the weight of her words settling like stones. Proof. The word felt solid, real, a weapon I could hold. But it wasn't enough, not yet. The dreams had shown me more than papers and signatures. They'd shown me power, a strength tied to the lake, to Jack's legacy, to the carvings that pulsed under my touch. I needed more than a courtroom to take back what was mine. I needed the truth to burn. Jessica pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop, her fingers moving with precision. "I checked your financial accounts as you asked. Look at this." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw them, 4 withdrawals, each a dagger to the heart. $7,850 to Lux Bridal Boston, $12,400 to D'Amato Jewelers, $21,000 to Lemur Resort Group, $9,600 to a Providence videographer specializing in drone footage. Heather's wedding paid for with my money siphoned from an old joint account I'd forgotten about set up years ago to help my father after his surgery. They used my name, my money, my house. I said, my voice low, trembling with something darker than anger. It was fury, yes, but also something else, a spark, a current like the carvings in my dreams. Jessica nodded. "We can trace every cent. The sale of the house, $320,000, well below market value, was rushed, likely to avoid scrutiny. The Petersons, the buyers, were told it was a family estate sale, no questions asked. But we have the paper trail, the notary's affidavit, the bank records. We can file a civil case, freeze the sale proceeds, and pursue criminal charges. This is airtight, Claire." I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. "And the house. Can we get it back? We will," she said, her voice a promise. "The Petersons are innocent, but the sale was illegal. We'll void it, restore ownership to you, and ensure they're compensated. But we need to move now before your parents try to cover their tracks." I nodded, my mind racing. The lake's whispers echoed in my ears. Take it back. But it wasn't just the house. It was my voice, my truth, the part of me they tried to erase. I thought of Jack, of his hands shaping the house of his words. "You're building yourself, Claire. Don't let anyone tear that down." I wouldn't. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur of evidence and preparation. Jessica worked like a sorceress, weaving a case from fragments, bank statements, property records, emails from the county clerk. I spent hours in my apartment organizing screenshots, scanning documents, my hands steady, but my heart a storm. The dreams grew vivid, almost tangible. One night I saw the lake house surrounded by mist, its windows glowing gold, and Jack standing on the dock, his eyes fixed on me. "The house knows," he said. "It's always known." I woke with a jolt, my fingers tingling, and found myself sketching the carvings from memory spirals within spirals, their lines curling like waves. I didn't understand the dreams, not fully, but they felt like a map guiding me towards something bigger than a lawsuit. The house wasn't just a place, it was a legacy, a power tied to Jack, to me, to the lake itself. And my family had tried to steal it, not just from me, but from whatever magic lived in its walls. Then came the moment that broke the last of my silence. I was walking back from a site visit the Boston streets, buzzing with autumn chill, when my phone pinged. A notification from Megan, an old college friend, tagging me in a Facebook post. I opened it without thinking, and there it was, Heather's face, radiant and perfect, beside a childhood photo of us at the lake house. I was holding her hand, her flower crown lopsided, my smile shy but real. The caption cut deeper than any knife. I've always looked up to my big sister Claire. She gave up so much, her time, her space, her legacy, so I could have the wedding of my dreams. She chose to live simply, to stay in the background, to let me shine. That's what real love looks like. Thank you, Claire, for your sacrifice. I'll make you proud. I read it 3 times, each word a fresh wound. Sacrifice. She turned my theft into a gift, my pain into a story of her own nobility. The comments poured in heart's tears, strangers praising Heather's grace, family friends calling me a saint. "You're so lucky to have a sister like Claire," one wrote. "She must love you so much," said another. My hands shook, not with tears, but with a rage that felt alive, electric, like the carvings in my dreams. They weren't just stealing my house, my money. They were stealing my story, rewriting me as a martyr who'd bowed willingly to their greed. Heather's post wasn't an apology. It was a performance, a spell to bind me to silence, to make the world believe I'd chosen this. But the lake was watching, and so was I. I closed the app and opened my laptop, my movements precise, deliberate. I pulled up every document Jessica had sent, bank records, the forged deed, Pamela's affidavit. I exported screenshots, organized emails, and began drafting a letter to the district attorney, each word sharp as a blade. I opened a video editor and stitched together a timeline, photos of the house before and after, scans of the forged signature footage of Jack's will-reading bank statements showing the stolen funds. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one. Not their polished lie, but the truth, raw and unyielding. By midnight, I'd drafted a formal complaint to the county recorder, a cease and desist order for the real estate agent who'd filed the fraudulent paperwork, and an outline for a public statement. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. I wasn't just taking back the house, I was taking back my voice, my power, the part of me they thought they could erase. As I worked, the dreams bled into reality. The carvings seemed to glow in my mind, their spirals guiding my hands, their whispers fueling my resolve. I saw Jack's face, his eyes steady, and felt the lake's presence vast and unyielding. The house was with me, its magic a fire in my veins. I wasn't alone in this fight, and I wasn't afraid. The next morning, I met Jessica at her office, the folder of evidence heavy in my hands. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she saw something new. "You're different today," she said, her voice curious. "I'm done being silent," I replied, and the words felt like a spell binding me to my own strength. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Good. Here's the plan. We file a motion to freeze the sale proceeds today. The notary's affidavit and the handwriting analysis are enough to void the deed. We'll notify the Petersons, ensure they're protected, and file a criminal complaint against your parents. This ends now." I handed her the folder, my heart steady for the first time in weeks, and Heather Jessica's eyes darkened. She knew. The withdrawals, the timing, she was complicit, even if she didn't sign the papers. We'll address her in the civil suit, but for now, we focus on your parents. They orchestrated this. I nodded, the lake's whispers echoing in my mind. Take it back. I saw the house in my dreams, its windows glowing, its carvings alive with light. It wasn't just a place, it was a promise, a power, and I was ready to claim it. But first, I needed to face my family, to shatter their lies with the truth. As I left Jessica's office, the air felt charged like the moment before a storm. The dreams had shown me the house, but they'd also shown me myself, fiercer, stronger, a woman who wouldn't be silenced. The lake was waiting, and so was I. The Morgan estate in Newport shimmered like a mirage, its marble pathways gleaming under the late afternoon sun, its gardens draped in silks that seemed spun from moonlight. Chandeliers hung from ancient oaks, their crystals catching the light like stars trapped in glass. The air hummed with the soft strains of a string quartet, the clink of champagne flutes, and the murmur of guests in black tie attire their voices a chorus of awe at the spectacle before them. Heather's wedding wasn't just an event, it was a spell, a performance of wealth and perfection meant to bind everyone in its thrall. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my pale blue gown a whisper against the glittering sequins around me. My hands were steady, but my heart beat with the rhythm of the lake, its whispers echoing from the dreams that haunted me each night. Harbor's Rest glowing under a starlit sky, its carvings pulsing Jack's voice urging, "Take it back, Claire. Claim what's yours." The house was with me, its magic a current in my veins, and tonight I would wield it. My parents, Robert and Elaine, sat at the center table, their faces radiant with pride, as if they'd conjured this extravagance themselves. Heather floated through the crowd, her custom French gown shimmering like a cascade of starlight, her diamond tiara catching every eye. She was the sun, and I was the shadow, or so they thought. But shadows have power too, and mine was waking. The ceremony began at precisely 5:30 p.m., the sky painted in hues of gold and lavender, as if the lake itself had lent its colors. Heather glided down the aisle, her veil trailing like mist, her smile radiant and untouchable. Tyler, her groom, stood at the altar polished, and perfect his eyes more on the hovering drones than on his bride. The guests rose in a practiced wave, their gasps choreographed their admiration, a currency Heather spent freely. I watched from the sidelines, my expression calm, my heart a storm. The reception was a vision of excess. Orchids spilled from gold-trimmed vases, their petals flown from distant shores. Waiters in white gloves moved like dancers, serving a 5-course meal paired with wines older than the oaks outside. Fireworks burst above, synchronized to the orchestra's crescendo, painting the sky in bursts of light that felt like mockery. Every detail screamed of money, my house, my legacy stolen to fund this fairy tale. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in their midst, nodding politely at acquaintances, my words few but deliberate. My parents spotted me near the dance floor, their faces lighting up with a warmth that didn't reach their eyes. "There she is," my father called, raising his scotch glass, his voice booming over the music. "Claire, the one who made all this possible." The crowd turned their eyes soft with pity, as if I'd chosen to give up everything. My mother joined in her floor-length gown, shimmering, a purchase I recognized from a Back Bay boutique, likely paid for with my savings. "We were just saying what a gift you've given this family." She said, her laugh light but sharp. "Thank you, Claire, for your generosity." I nodded my smile, a mirror of theirs, my voice steady. Glad I could be here. The words were simple, but they carried a weight only I could feel. The lake's whispers pulsed in my ears, the carving's glow flashing in my mind. They thought they'd won, thought their lies had bound me. But the house was watching, and so was I, Dot. As the night deepened, the air grew heavy with perfume and champagne, the lanterns casting a golden haze over the ballroom. Heather took the microphone, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with the triumph of her perfect day. The crowd hushed their attention, hers to command. She stood beneath a cascade of white orchids, a glass of wine in hand, her voice a melody meant to enchant. "I know I'm supposed to toast my new husband." She began her laugh, charming practiced. "But first, I want to raise a glass to someone else." She turned to me, her eyes locking on mine across the dance floor, her smile a spell of false gratitude. "To my sister Claire. You've always been quiet, selfless, strong. You've given me more than I ever deserved, your time, your space, your heart. You chose peace over drama, letting me have this day, this dream. You gave up something precious without asking for anything in return." Gasps rippled through the crowd, murmurs of admiration swelling like a tide. Heather's voice softened her performance flawless. I know you don't like attention, but I want everyone here to know I see your sacrifice. I'll never forget what you've done for me. You're the reason this day is possible. The applause was deafening, a wave of pity and praise crashing over me. To them, I was the sainted sister, the quiet benefactor who'd stepped aside so Heather could shine. My hands tightened around my glass, the stem cool against my skin. I felt their eyes, family, friends, strangers, watching me, waiting for me to bow, to accept the role they'd written for me. But the lake was with me. Its whispers grew louder, a chorus in my blood, and the carving's glow burned behind my eyes. I saw Jack's face in my dreams, his voice steady. You're stronger than their lies. This wasn't sacrifice, it was theft, and I was done being their shadow. I stood my gown, rustling softly, and raised my glass. The crowd quieted their eyes, fixed on me, expectant. My voice was clear, calm, carrying a weight that cut through the music. I'm glad you think so, Heather. I said, my gaze unwavering. I hope you enjoy every moment of today, the music, the dress, the wine. And when you wake tomorrow, make sure you check your mailbox. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, her smile faltering for a heartbeat. The crowd paused, sensing the shift, but the orchestra resumed, and the moment passed like a cloud over the moon. Heather recovered, laughing lightly, raising her glass again, and the guests followed their laughter, a fragile echo. I sat down, my expression unchanged, my heart steady. The words had been my first spell, a warning woven with truth, and the lake's magic hummed in my veins. I slipped away from the ballroom, the night air cool against my skin, the stars sharp above the estate. The dreams flashed through me. Harbor's Rest, glowing its carvings alive. Jack's voice, a beacon, claim it. I'd sent the letters that afternoon, certified couriers carrying Jessica's documents, the complaint, the notary's affidavit, the forged signature analysis, the bank records. They'd arrive tomorrow, landing like stones in still water, rippling through my family's lies. The house had warned me, its whispers guiding me to the truth. The carvings, the dreams, the lake, they were part of me, a power I was only beginning to understand. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for myself, for the girl Jack had seen, for the woman I was becoming. The wedding was Heather's stage, but tomorrow would be mine. As I stood under the stars, the lake's presence settled over me, vast and unyielding. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I was back at Harbor's Rest. The dock creaking under my feet, the carvings warm under my fingers. The house was waiting, and so was I. The morning after Heather's wedding, the air in Boston felt charged, as if the city itself held its breath. I sat on my apartment's deck, a cup of tea steaming in my hands, the folder of evidence beside me like a talisman. The dreams had been relentless last night. Harbor's Rest, glowing under a sky of endless stars, its carvings pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Jack's voice, a steady chant. You've claimed the truth, Claire. Now claim the house. The lake was with me, its whispers a fire in my veins, urging me forward. Today, the world would see what I'd known all along my family's lies couldn't hold against the truth. At 9:02 a.m., the first courier arrived at my parents' home. I imagined my mother Elaine in the kitchen, still basking in the afterglow of Heather's wedding flowers, spilling across every surface champagne flutes, cluttering the sink. My father, Robert, would be at the dining table reading the paper, smug in their victory. The manila envelope delivered with a signature request would shatter that illusion. Inside were Jessica's documents, a formal complaint, a report of property transfer fraud, Pamela Rohr's affidavit, confirming her stolen notary seal, a forensic handwriting analysis, proving the forged signature, and a demand for the return of the $320,000 sale proceeds. Screenshots of my bank withdrawals tied to Heather's wedding sealed their guilt. I didn't need to be there to know their faces would pale, their hands would tremble. The lake's whispers had promised me this moment, and I felt its power now steadying me as I sipped my tea. The truth wasn't loud. It was relentless, like the tide, and it was breaking over them. Across town, other envelopes landed. One reached the Morgan estate handed to Tyler's father, who'd bankrolled part of the wedding's excess. Another arrived at the wedding planner's office, alerting them that their payments were under investigation. Even the videographer received a cease and desist warning that the drone footage filmed over my stolen property was part of a legal dispute. Each letter was a thread in the spell I'd cast, unraveling my family's lies with surgical precision. My phone rang just before Noon Heather's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring once, then answered, my voice calm as the lake at dawn. "Hello?" Her voice was a storm, high-pitched and trembling with rage and disbelief. "Are you serious right now? Claire, legal documents on my honeymoon? You're destroying everything. Do you know what this looks like? What people will think? I don't care what people think," I said, my tone even cutting through her panic. "I care what's true." "You could have waited," she snapped. "You could have talked to me privately. You didn't have to humiliate us." I leaned back in my chair, the lake's whispers pulsing in my ears. "I gave you chances, Heather. Multiple chances. You didn't just take my house. You used my name, my money, my silence, and then you turned me into a prop for your fairy tale." She was silent for a beat, then her voice cracked. "You're ruining the family. You know that." "No." I said, my words sharp as the carving's edges. "You did that. I'm just cleaning up." The call ended her silence, louder than her words. I set the phone down, my heart steady the lake's presence, a warm hum in my chest. The dreams flashed through me. Harbor's Rest glowing its windows alive. Jack's voice a beacon. "The house is yours. Claim it." I was ready. The next day, Jessica arranged a meeting at a neutral law office in Cambridge. I arrived at 2:00 p.m. dressed in a simple navy suit, my leather-bound folder of evidence in hand. My parents were already there, seated in a small conference room, their faces aged by the weight of the last 48 hours. Robert's jaw was tight, his eyes defensive. Elaine's were pleading, her hands clasped like a prayer she didn't deserve to have answered. Jessica sat beside me, crisp and composed, her presence a shield. "Thank you for coming." Elaine began, her voice soft, trembling. "We understand you're upset, Claire." I didn't respond. Jessica opened her folder, her movements deliberate. "We're beyond upset," she said, her tone professional but unyielding. "We're dealing with criminal misconduct, forgery, identity theft, real estate fraud, unauthorized access to financial accounts. This isn't about feelings. It's about facts." Robert cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "There must be a way to resolve this quietly. As a family." I met his gaze, my heart steady the lake's whispers, a quiet roar. "You had every chance to act like family," I said. "Instead, you acted like thieves." Elaine leaned forward, her eyes wet. "If we pay back what we took, can we settle this privately?" Jessica slid a document across the table. "This is a repayment schedule," she said. "It includes restitution for the $320,000 sale financial penalties and legal costs. Sign it, pay the first installment by Friday, and we can pause further filings. If not, we proceed to court." Robert's jaw tightened. "You'd take us to court, your own parents." I looked at him, the carving's glow flashing in my mind, Jack's voice steady. "You're stronger than their lies." "You already did," I said. "You just didn't think I'd fight back." The real confrontation came a week later at the Petersons' home, the lake house itself, though it felt like a stranger under its new paint and locks. They'd offered it as neutral ground, and I agreed. It was fitting after all they were victims too caught in my family's web of lies. I stood on the porch, my hand brushing the railings, and felt it a faint pulse like the carvings were waking, recognizing me. The house knew I was here, and it was ready. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Robert and Elaine sat stiffly, their faces pale. Heather arrived, last her eyes downcast, her husband nowhere in sight. Jessica sat beside me, her case folder closed her presence a quiet strength. I stood, my voice calm but commanding, and began without ceremony. "I've kept quiet long enough," I said, placing a tablet on the table. I tapped the screen, and a slideshow began, methodical, relentless. The first slide showed the forged deed, my signature twisted into a lie. The second listed the bank withdrawals, each tied to Heather's wedding. The third was Pamela's affidavit confirming her stolen seal. Emails, timelines, and a summary of legal penalties followed each slide, a thread in the spell I was weaving. Elaine sat motionless, her face flushed. Robert's lips pressed into a thin line. Heather looked like she might break her hands, trembling in her lap. I let the silence settle, then spoke again. "I wanted this to be private. I gave you chances to come clean. You didn't." Jessica's voice was even cutting. "If we go to court, this becomes public record forgery, theft, manipulation. But Claire has agreed to give you one chance to resolve this here." Sarah Peterson stepped forward, holding a manila folder, her face etched with sadness. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure she said, addressing me. "But you deserve the truth." She turned to Elaine. "You didn't think I'd remember you, did you? We worked together at St. Mary's years ago. I was in HR, you were an office manager. When you sold us the house, you said it was yours. You never mentioned Claire." Elaine's jaw clenched, her eyes dropping. "This isn't the time it is," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "You lied to us, Elaine. You used our trust." I turned to my mother, the lake's whispers roaring now. "You knew the buyers. You counted on me not noticing, on me being too loyal, too quiet." Heather shifted, her voice brittle as she spoke for the first time. "I'm sorry, Claire. I saw one of the documents a few days before the wedding. It had your name. Dad said you'd agreed that it was handled. I didn't ask questions. I needed the wedding to go smoothly. I let her words hang heavy as the lake's depths. I needed the wedding. Not I tried to stop it. Not I'm sorry we stole from you. Just a confession of convenience." The carvings pulsed in my mind, their glow of fire, and I felt the house's strength flow through me. Jessica slid a document across the table. "These are Claire's terms," she said, her voice clipped. "Full restitution of the $320,000. Public acknowledgement that Claire is the rightful owner and the sale was fraudulent. A written apology to the Petersons and legal representatives. Closure of all financial accounts linked to Claire's estate. And Robert and Elaine must attend family mediation and psychological evaluation before any further contact with Claire." Elaine inhaled sharply. "A therapist. You're weaponizing my love for this family. You used it against me." I said, my voice steady, the lake's power in every word. "I want proof that if I speak to you again, it won't be as someone you can manipulate." Heather looked at me, her voice cracking. "Do you hate me?" I paused, the room still, the carvings glow warm in my mind. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't trust you. And trust is harder to rebuild than a house." The courtroom was quiet, the judge's voice a steady echo against the paneled walls. I sat upright, my hands clasped the lake's whispers, a soft hum in my chest. "The court finds that the property transaction involving Harbor's Rest was executed under fraudulent circumstances." He said, his words clear, deliberate. "The sale is hereby voided. Legal ownership is restored to Miss Claire Emerson." I didn't smile, but I nodded a quiet acknowledgement of the justice I'd fought for. Jessica's hand rested on my arm, a silent affirmation. The Petersons seated nearby exchanged glances of relief. They'd trusted the wrong people, but my resolve had ensured they'd walk away whole, their investment repaid, their legal fees covered. My parents avoided prison, but the cost was steeper than they'd imagined. In exchange for dropping criminal charges, they agreed to full restitution and a public statement admitting their wrongdoing. But the town turned cold. Friends stopped calling. Church members looked away. Their bridge club erased their names. Elaine's volunteer group asked her to step down. Robert's fishing buddies left him out of their trips. It wasn't anger. It was silence, the kind that isolates, the kind that mirrors the loneliness they'd once left me to bear. Heather's fall was swifter. A month after the wedding, Tyler filed for annulment, his image-driven marriage crumbling under the weight of the scandal. The honeymoon paid for with loans he never intended to repay left Heather drowning in debt. Her social circle, once vibrant with praise, turned to whispers and avoidance. She moved to a small apartment, her social media silent, her absence at family gatherings, a ghost of her former radiance. As I left the courtroom, the lake's presence settled over me, warm and sure. The dreams flashed through me Harbor's Rest, glowing, its carvings alive. Jack's voice a promise. The house is yours. I'd taken it back not just with papers and laws, but with a strength I hadn't known I had. The lake was with me, and I was ready to go home. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway of Harbor's Rest. The lake stretching out before me like a mirror holding the sky. The air was crisp, scented with pine and water, and the house stood as it always had, sturdy, weathered alive. The new paint and keypad lock were gone, replaced by Jack's soft green shutters and brass knob restored by my hands over weeks of careful work. I stepped onto the porch, my fingers brushing the spiral carvings on the railings, and felt it a pulse warm and steady, as if the house were welcoming me home. The dreams had led me here, their glow fading now, their whispers softening into a single truth. You've claimed it, Claire. You're home. The courtroom victory had been mine, but this was the real triumph. Harbor's Rest was more than wood and stone. It was a sanctuary, a legacy, a power woven into my bones by Jack's hands and the lake's magic. I'd taken it back not just from my family's lies, but from the part of me that had stayed silent too long. The carvings hummed under my touch, and for the first time in months, I felt whole. The weeks after the ruling were a quiet storm for my family. My parents, Robert and Elaine, returned to their carefully curated life, but the cracks were undeniable. The town turned away their whispers sharper than any verdict. Friends stopped calling, their invitations drying up like a summer stream. Elaine's volunteer group asked her to step down, her name erased from their roster. Robert's fishing trips grew solitary, his buddies citing conflicts that sounded like excuses. They weren't shunned outright, just left in a silence they'd once imposed on me, a mirror of their own making. Heather's fall was steeper, her radiance dimmed by the weight of her choices. Tyler's annulment hit the week after the ruling, his family unwilling to tether their name to a scandal. The wedding's loans, lavish and unpaid, piled up, forcing Heather into a small apartment in Providence. Her social media accounts silent, her followers drifting away. The world she'd built on borrowed dreams crumbled, leaving her to face the truth she'd avoided. Her fairy tale had been built on my pain. I didn't revel in their losses. The lake's whispers had taught me that justice wasn't about gloating. It was about balance, about restoring what was broken. I focused on the house, sanding its floors, repainting its walls, hanging Jack's old photographs. Each task felt like a ritual, a way of weaving myself back into the house's magic. The carvings glowed faintly at dusk, their spirals curling like waves, and I felt Jack's presence in every creak, every shadow. One afternoon, as I cleaned the attic, I found it a small wooden box tucked beneath a floorboard, its lid carved with the same spirals that haunted my dreams. My heart quickened as I opened it, revealing a letter in Jack's steady script, the paper worn but warm, as if it had been waiting for me. I sat on the attic floor, dust motes dancing in the sunlight, and read, Claire, if you're reading this, you've found your way back. I built this house for you, not just a place, but a promise. You're stronger than you know, kids stronger than their noise, their lies. The lake sees you just as I always did. It's in the carvings, the water, the quiet moments you hold close. Don't let anyone tell you who you are. This house is yours. And so is your story. Keep building yourself. Love Jack tears blurred the ink, but I didn't wipe them away. The words were a spell binding me to the truth I'd fought for. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the carving's pulse echo through me the lake's whispers, a soft song. You're home. Jack had known somehow that I'd need this, his voice, his faith, his magic to carry me through. A month later, a letter arrived not from a courier, but in Heather's uneven handwriting. I opened it on the dock, the lake calm before me, its surface reflecting a sky streaked with dawn. Inside was a note brief, but heavy Claire. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough, but it's all I have right now. I had a daughter, Leia, born last week. I'd like you to be her godmother if you'll have us. I'm trying to do better. I sat for a long time, the letter in my lap, the lake's whispers soft but clear. I didn't forgive Heather, not fully, not yet. Trust was a bridge, burned its ashes, scattered across the water. But Leia was innocent, a new life, untouched by our family's mistakes. I thought of Jack, of his lessons in patience, in building things that lasted. I could be that for Leia, a steady hand, a quiet strength, without letting Heather's shadow dim my light. I wrote back my words, measured I'll be Leia's godmother, but on my terms. We keep our distance for now. I wish you well, Heather, but I'm done carrying your weight. I mailed it that afternoon, the act a quiet release, like setting down a stone I'd carried too long. I stood on the dock at sunset, the lake a canvas of gold and lavender, its whispers now a gentle hum. The house stood behind me, its windows glowing, its carvings alive with a warmth that matched my own. I wasn't the girl who'd stayed silent, nor the woman who'd fought only with papers and laws. I was something more, a keeper of the lake's magic, a builder of my own story, a voice that would never be silenced again. The dreams had stopped their purpose fulfilled, but the house still spoke in its own way through the creak of the dock, the pulse of the carvings, the ripple of the water. Jack's letter rested in my pocket, a talisman of his love, and I knew he was with me, woven into the house's bones, the lake's depths. I'd reclaimed Harbor's Rest, but more than that, I'd reclaimed myself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I closed my eyes, letting the lake's peace settle over me. The world was quiet, but I was not. I was a storm, a song, a spell, and I was home.